Of course, you draw your e-cig while we're going live.
Deal with it.
It's the only thing your e-cig does that makes noise. So whenever we start, the first thing you do is draw on your e-cig. So the first noise is that's the first noise recorded on the podcast. I have to edit it off like every episode.
Hey, yeah, the second thing is your horrible voice. God, just start the thing. God.
Tech Twice Weekly, episode number 16. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a special Tuesday edition of Tech Twice Weekly. It is September 23rd, 2014, and I'm your host, Ben White. This is your source for technology news and discussion twice a week, normally every Monday and Thursday. Sorry for playing hooky yesterday. There were a few scheduling conflicts that couldn't be avoided, but we're back today, and as always, I've got my good friend Eric Fee. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Just thinking about the fact that this is number 16. So we have previously recorded 15 episodes. I was actually gone for one of those, but we have previously recorded 15 episodes. Like this is like week 8. It's actually more than week 8 because we did like skip a week.
Right? It's like almost a real thing. That's not even counting PAX, where I blew off 2 episodes because I was so brain dead.
Don't pretend this is real.
We actually have listeners. People are downloading this show.
The question is, are people that know us or not?
That is a good question. Hey, people, do you know us? Feedback at TechTwiceWeekly.com. Twitter, TechTwiceWeekly. Hit us up. Let us know. Are you somebody who knows us? Somebody who doesn't know us? That's the question, the homework for the audience.
Let's just plug everything else. We got Reddit. We got the website.
We have,
We got
but we
got
have
Facebook.
Reddit's there, but I have been horrible about using it, and that's my bad. I apologize to our audience.
Stop apologizing and actually use it.
I will make a commitment to begin using Reddit after this episode. Well, using Reddit for the show after this episode.
Yeah, I'll see that happen.
Hey, you're on the Reddit too. You could use it as well.
TechTwiceWeekly.com. Reddit. R Tech Twice Weekly. Tech Twice. What's our Facebook again?
Tech Twice Weekly.
I thought it was TTW.
Uh, no.
No.
We're
Question mark.
every social network, but I'm pretty sure it's all Tech Twice Weekly. I don't think I have anything that's TTW. Facebook.com/Tech Twice Weekly.
Here we go. Plugged.
Excellent. Well, with all of our bases covered on social media, I guess I should hit the headlines. All right, so starting us off tonight, Polygon is covering the news that Blizzard has officially pulled the plug on Titan. Oh, you've never heard about Titan? Don't worry, a lot of people haven't heard about it because it's been a fairly secret development project for the last 7 years. The game was intended to be Blizzard's next-gen MMO, but today, Blizzard's co-founder and CEO, Mike Morahami, declared in a statement that the game Titan was never officially announced and it never will be. They're going back to the drawing board and starting from scratch on developing their next big MMO. I know you used to be a big World of Warcraft player and probably kept up on some Blizzard news. Eric, what do you think about this?
I remember hearing about Titan quite a few years ago, and it was supposed to be a completely new IP with new everything. And of course, it was abandoned because reasons.
I think that just about sums up the announcement from the CEO, actually. Canceled because reasons.
Yep, I was excited to figure out what all the hype was about for so many years, but now I will never know. I will die unfulfilled.
Don't worry, I'm sure Blizzard will come up with some replacement MMO and find a way to sucker you in for $50 a game and $20 a month again.
Good luck. They're gonna have to work really hard for that.
I'm actually personally convinced that any new MMO that Blizzard comes out with, at least in the current marketplace, would have to have some form of free to play attachment to compete in the market.
You'd be surprised. Blizzard loyalists are great a many. There are very many, and they will lovingly put out money to play their games. Not only that, but some MMOs are really a cut above and still operate on a pay scheme. WildStar is still, last time I heard, doing well, which is still a monthly pay. And we'll see if it continues to be viable, but I don't see why it wouldn't.
That's a good point. I'd forgotten that WildStar joined the market as pay only. That's true. Well, to run those new and upcoming games, you're going to need a video card. And PC Gamer brings us NVIDIA's announcement on their two newest top-of-the-line desktop graphics cards running under the Maxwell architecture. The cards are the GTX 970, priced at $329, and the GTX 980, priced at $550. And while every new generation of graphics cards compared to the previous generation, one of the really impressive improvements these cards offer is power efficiency. The Maxwell architecture is allowing these cards to deliver twice the performance per watt compared to the last generation of Kepler cards. Additionally, NVIDIA has made an effort to make sure that these cards are hitting the market at a very competitive price point. We'll have a link to the exact hardware specs on both of these cards in our show notes. Also, already announced are several graphics card manufacturers' versions of these cards, including EVGA and others. Do you find the applications in the Chrome Marketplace a little bit dry compared to the Google Play Store on Android? Well, that's about to change. The OMG Chrome blog is reporting on a command line tool previously allowing nearly any Android application to be run under Chrome OS. And now this program has been modified to run under Windows, Mac, and Linux. That's right, you can now run nearly any Android application through the Chrome browser on your desktop. This is the first version of this release, however, so keep in mind there may be some bugs you run into while you're testing it out. Updates are expected. When we've got a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. I personally haven't had a chance to fire it up, but that's my plan later tonight to give it a try. So I'll report back on Thursday's show and let you know how it works out. Let's see here. TechSpot is sharing that Google has confirmed the next version of the Android OS will feature data encryption being enabled by default. This will make it incredibly difficult for law enforcement agencies to force Google to provide personal information on device owners running the newest OS. And while Android has included the option to enable device encryption on many devices since 2011, it had to be enabled manually, which has meant many users either never knew about the feature or simply never bothered to turn it on. Keep in mind, however, that while having your device encrypted is a great step towards securing users' privacy, Google does still want to sync all of your data to their cloud, which means your data is no longer encrypted on your device and no longer fully in your control. What do you think about this, Eric? Are you a fan of Android's full device encryption?
Oh yes, and even more so now that to enable it, you need not wipe your phone. I had it enabled on my, oh gosh, I can't remember which phone that was. Anyways, I remember I enabled it when it first came out, and it was great except for the fact to wipe my phone, which is annoying. But nowadays, I have a PIN on my phone, and it's completely encrypted, and it has been for a while. And I know that if it gets stolen, I most likely will never get it back, but at least I'll never know what was on it.
That's interesting. I wasn't aware that when the data encryption was originally offered as part of the OS, it required formatting the phone to enable the encryption. I just flipped on the Google encryption on my Nexus 5, oh, probably 3, 4 months back at this point, and it took maybe half an hour to encrypt everything and go through it, but all of my data was there. It just encrypted it all. Um, would you know what version that changed or how far back that might have changed?
I'm not sure. It's been a while.
What phone are you thinking that happened on? Is it maybe the back on the Nexus 1?
Like I said, I can't quite remember. I had a bunch of phones in a 2-year span.
Sure, sure. Well, and Android phones particularly change rather quickly. But I guess that the important part is that it's a good thing that it has changed.
Totally, it should be as easy as possible to encrypt your phone.
Now, the one thing I'm wondering is when Android L comes out and turns on encryption by default, is it going to have the option to turn off that encryption or choose not to encrypt the device? Because right now, once a device has been encrypted, it cannot be disabled without formatting the device.
Yeah, it's true. And another interesting caveat is a lot of people do not like to have a lock screen code, and will encryption of the device be supported without a lock screen code or PIN?
That is a good point because right now it's not. If you have your device encrypted, you're required to maintain a PIN or password code on your device.
And that's a question. Another good question. If it does not support devices without a lock screen mechanism, would it support devices with a face unlock or a pattern instead of a PIN or password?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Google handles their security requirements with that and how much they change from KitKat to Android L. Speaking of Android L, I know the rumors are saying come November we're going to finally get the Android L release. Do you have any guesses what L is going to stand for?
That's a good question.
I know internally they're being pretty tight-lipped about it, but I've heard some ideas thrown around. Lollipop is pretty popular. Some people say they've seen references in the code base that reference LMP, hinting at lemon meringue pie.
Ooh, that's a good one. I do love lemon meringue.
Personally, I think it's going to stick with L. I think they're going to ditch the candy names and it's going to release as Android L.
Indeed. It's quite the bold statement there. Okay, to place a wager?
Hmm. How about what's your side of the wager? You got to throw up a guess.
That's a good question.
Or you betting on lemon meringue pie, the current popular favorite on the internet?
Well, I would like lemon meringue pie because it's a delicious treat. I'm to get back to you on the wager, though. It's an enticing offer.
Maybe we'll settle up over dinner sometime. Maybe try finding some dark bar to record a live on-person show some night.
Totally. And, we haven't had dinner in 2 months. So don't give me this dinner stuff if you're not going to follow through. You're breaking a guy's heart over here.
We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
Yes, everyone, Ben is a dinner tease.
I've been called worse. All right. Leaving on that, our next story is about TrueCrypt. Hopefully, you remember TrueCrypt, the free encryption tool that had its developers suddenly drop the project and begin warning users to abandon the software a few years back. Well, the eSecurity Planet website is covering news that a new team has picked up the project and is making an effort to fork the code base to release a new encryption tool called CipherShed. Even more impressive is they're developing it under a new open source license. eSecurity Planet's article does a really incredible deep dive into the whole TrueCrypt backstory and explains what offerings the new CipherShed project is intending to offer. So if you're interested in TrueCrypt, if you've used it in the past or it's something you're familiar with, I definitely advise you to check out the article. And as always, we'll have a link to it in our show notes. I don't want to go into the nitty gritty during the show here. I think it's over a lot of people's heads or just irrelevant to a lot of people. But I'm very excited to see a new encryption tool coming on the market being offered for users. And I really like the fact that it's open source. So the code can be inspected and be publicly scrutinized for its actual security practices. This story, submitted by Eric himself, comes from Ars Technica, reporting on Kickstarter updating their terms of use and policies for crowd-funded projects run through their service. While previous updates to the terms of service have included putting limitations on what can be offered as campaign rewards, this update instead focuses on guidelines for project creators setting expectations with their backers. It is believed this change comes from recent news of several high-profile Kickstarter projects announcing they've gone broke and will not be delivering promised rewards to their backers. The changes explain Kickstarter's expectations on how creators will handle the situation if a project does stop functioning, no longer is viable. It requires creators to either issue refunds to backers who request it or explain how backer rewards will be fulfilled in an alternative form. I know you keep an eye on Kickstarter, and I've backed quite a lot of Kickstarters myself. Eric, what do you think about these changes?
I think that they're very important to curb the current Kickstarter system abuse that we're starting to see. And not only that, but stop over lofty projects from being funded by many people and then completely destroyed because the original conceiver of this project was unprepared to actually fulfill it. There have been some high-profile cases and many projects that no one really cared about where they have just been a complete loss. And I think that hopefully they'll bring more legitimacy to Kickstarter projects. And I'm hoping that people still go to Kickstarter as opposed to other crowdsourcing websites, simply because with implementation of rules like this, they can keep projects that aren't ready or that may never be ready from participating. Whereas with places like Indiegogo, which have significantly more lax systems, don't have any type of backer safeguards.
Definitely, yeah. And I'd love to see more legitimacy and more oversight come to Kickstarter. I've, for a long time, thought that if you're running a Kickstarter project, your books on where my money is going should be open to the backers. And I think especially some of these private companies that are asking for public funding, should be required for at least all funds associated with the project to be completely transparent. And while this change doesn't require that, I think it's a step in the right direction towards getting there. Have you backed any projects that have gone bust so far?
Not yet. Some that I've backed haven't delivered yet, but there's always more time.
Yeah, so far I've gotten lucky, and probably about a third of my projects have all shipped. I've kind of pulled back for a little while on Kickstarter. I was floating far too many projects that were unfulfilled. But it seems to be the ones that always miss their target, at least that I back, seem to be the software projects, video games particularly. Most of my hardware projects all seem to ship, sometimes delayed, but all seem to ship inevitably or eventually. But I don't know. On paper, I would expect the hardware projects to be the ones that get delayed, but it turns out only my software projects are the ones that are a year plus behind schedule. Well, let's see. Speaking of former Kickstarter projects, PC Gamer passes along news from the Oculus Connect conference about the newest version of the Oculus Rift VR headset being announced. Codenamed Crescent Bay, the newest Oculus Rift prototype is a massive leap over the current Oculus Rift DK2 developer kit. The Crescent Bay headset features a lighter body, higher resolution display, integrated audio, and a 360-degree head tracking. Currently, no release date has been announced, and CEO Brendan Irbibe, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, made it clear that this is still considered a developer product and not a consumer version of the Oculus Rift headset. Are you a big fan of Oculus Rift and VR, Eric? Have you been following the development of this project?
I've been keeping tabs on Oculus since its announcement, and I am extremely interested in how it's going to come about. I think that the Oculus has a very high chance of changing how we play video games, but also how we interact with our computers in general. And I think that there will be a lot of market for the Oculus Rift as a general computing device, not just for video games. And to put how I feel about it succinctly, I'm looking forward to people using their computers in a way similar that in The Matrix 2, when the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar go to Zion, you see Zion Control logged into the construct program there, managing the gates and the security systems of the city. That's what I imagine people using their computers like might be with technological advances like really high definition VR.
Wow, that would be a really interesting change for the way we currently use our computer systems. That would really be kind of bringing sci-fi to reality. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the idea of not Mission Impossible, but
Minority Report.
Thank you for reading my mind.
Too much hand movement with that stuff.
But I like moving my hands. I can, make things happen. New Yorkers would be particularly happy with hand gesture-based computing.
Imagine if you had to do that for 8 hours a day, though. You'd chop your freaking arms off.
I'd have bigger biceps.
This is the look of disapproval. Anyone not watching the YouTube stream, I'm giving him the look.
That look is because I wouldn't have bigger biceps. I might have biceps to begin with. But Do you think you'd pick up an Oculus once it actually comes out for the consumer market?
Oh yes, I'm getting in line. I'm not going to. I'm not going to go out there and purchase a development version because, for obvious reasons, that even though I could get the capability of maybe running some software for it, or who knows, I'm really looking forward to more when there is a lot of software that supports it and it's easily plug and play. I'm not looking forward to something that requires a lot of work to use. I already have enough programming projects on my plate. I don't need more. So there's that. But the day that they announce a consumer version, I will be one of those weird people that is in line for 2 days straight to buy it.
That's awesome. Well, as soon as you pick it up, you can be on the show with the thing strapped to your face, and we'll do the show in a 3D lounge hanging out.
Yes, that's what I'm waiting for. Second life support.
You know it's coming, and you know people are going to be performing unspeakable acts in 3D.
They're literally going to be doing things that you can't do in real life. They're that heinous.
Or illegal. So, leaving that topic behind,
As far behind as possible.
right? See that line back there? The one we crossed? That's the line. Recode is reporting on rumors that Apple may be shutting down the Beats music service. Apple purchased Beats Electronics for $3 billion earlier this year and currently is still operating the Beats music service for $10 a month. Rumors have been circulating that Apple may be looking to shut the service down, but, however, according to Apple's PR representative, it simply isn't true. Beyond that one clarifying statement, however, Apple has been completely silent on the matter. And for what it's worth, I'm not sure how big of a subscriber base Beats Music really has. I could see it being folded into iTunes rather than being shut down myself. But Tom's Hardware, in a personally much more interesting story, is covering a joint announcement from the Video Electronics Standards Association, VESA, and the USB 3.0 Promoter Group, introducing the DisplayPort alternate mode for USB Type-C standard cables. Not sure what that means? Don't worry. The important part is that the new cable will allow over 4K resolution to be transferred over the DisplayPort, as well as passing along standard USB data on a Type-C cable. This new cable also supports passing traditional USB data between devices as well. This means we could see displays offering resolutions up to 5,120 pixels by 2,880 pixels. Massive resolutions. And all of that while still having the overhead available to provide pass-through data functionality. What do you think of a cable like this? It basically seems like USB's take on Apple's Thunderbolt technology.
Thunderbolt is not Apple's technology. Thunderbolt is Intel's technology, first of all. Second of all, Thunderbolt is a huge pain.
Doing what with Thunderbolt?
Anything besides a single plug. So, I have a MacBook Pro, and although I like the device, I will tell you my experiences with Thunderbolt this far. Technically, my device supports 2 displays via the Thunderbolt connection. That's gravy, except the only way to do that is either to buy 2 Apple Cinema displays and chain them together, and we all know that those are extremely expensive, or to buy a very expensive Thunderbolt hub that may or may not work correctly. Some of them support multiple Thunderbolt connections, but only one display. So, the problem with Thunderbolt is there's not enough aftermarket support for real-life device usage, And if there is support, it's very expensive, such as Thunderbolt-based RAID devices or so on and so forth, are very expensive and meant for high-end workstation type uses. But with USB being the de facto interconnect now for basically all devices, adding this kind of support will mean I can get a $15 Saiba or some Rosewell cheap hub that will support chaining multiple monitors together or something to that effect. And that's what I'm really looking forward to, is having the power of Thunderbolt, but the ease of use and availability and inexpensiveness of USB.
I didn't even think about passing through a hub with one of these cables, but I can see that now. That would be an excellent use case because, especially with the USB throughput, you could have a hub that allows you to connect multiple displays and connect multiple USB devices like external hard drives or phones or other data sources, all through one hub going back to the main system. I could see that being really powerful.
Well, plus imagine any phone that can support being a USB host will also support external monitors by plugging it in. You don't have to go buy a slim port or OTG adapter or all these other weird things that some phones support.
Oh, interesting. So you're suggesting that you could take your Nexus phone, plug one of these into it per se, and then all of a sudden your phone can act as the computer running the system to the external monitor.
If the device supports USB host, which is an important distinction, but the Nexus 5 actually does support USB host, and it also supports Slim port, which is a kind of another display adapter thing. Another thing to note, it's actually getting away from me. I don't know if you mentioned this, but with the USB 3 Type C adapter, it has the same plug on both ends. So you will, theoretically, you only need one cable. There will not be Type A and B, the square and the rectangle shaped plugs. They'll just be one. And it's slightly bigger than current micro USB ports, but the example that they had of the port was actually mounted mid-board, not on top of a circuit board. So that there's that also.
Well, and I think the other thing that's going to be interesting about this is, if I'm remembering the article correctly, the cable is reversible. There is no up or down on the cable. So no more will you have the conundrum of plugging a USB cable in, flipping it over, it still doesn't fit, flipping it over, it still doesn't fit, flipping it back over, and magically it now fits. The USB will no longer have a superposition of not fitting in the USB port.
The interesting thing about it is the reason why it is slightly larger than a current micro USB is just that it supports both orientations.
Oh, so the size was more out of functionality than necessity. Interesting.
I think it's much more valuable to have a cable that you can flip over. It doesn't really matter which side you plug it in. This has been a common request for a long time for USB.
I wonder how long until we see this actually out in the consumer market.
Who knows? USB 3 has been getting lots and lots of traction, so it's very possible that we might see it soon.
Well, I'll have to keep my eye out because I've got a monitor that I'm due to replace, and I'd love to replace it with something like that. Especially if the price on some of those larger displays comes down without having to support Thunderbolt.
Oh, another interesting note I forgot to mention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it before or not, but I'd like to reiterate. The cable is supposed to support up to 100 watts.
That's right. No, I didn't mention that. That gives it a whole nother level of potential.
Well, it just means that the vast majority of devices you can have can be powered by a single powered and communicate with a single plug. So you could have a monitor that only has a USB Type C, and then so you just plug it in once right there, and not only do you have your display and you have your data, you can have a built-in hub, audio, all support over one plug as with more power than a monitor needs.
Would it support pass-through so I could daisy chain a monitor or two, do you know?
It will support a hub just like all of the USBs before it, so you should be able to, if it has a hub built into a monitor, you should be able to connect another device.
So in adhering to the USB standard, how far can you chain out a hub? Is there a limit there?
Yes, but it's higher than you'll need.
But then is that going to change, especially passing that kind of power along a cable? Or is it just a limitation where you're going to hit using 100 watts, and once that capacity is used up in the chain, that's the end of it?
Probably, but at the same time, you have more than one USB port on your computer and powered hubs. So, I mean, most hubs, like I have more than one powered hub lying around here, that they don't pull power over a USB. They are powered by a wall socket, so they have no problems passing more power than my computer could.
Sure, sure. I'm just thinking going direct from a USB port to, say, a 30-inch monitor. Because the idea that I could run a display of monitors off a single USB port is kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah, totally. New LED monitors use around 20 watts. So, an LED backlit monitor, cold cathode monitors can use up to like 50 or 60 or 70. But a LED backlit monitor will use much less power, so there's no reason why if it really can pump out 100 watts, there's no reason why you couldn't have one, two, or even three LED monitors connected to one cable.
That's just crazy.
So,
And it makes me wonder if assuming this standard takes off, as I see no reason why it shouldn't, if we would someday see graphics cards manufacturers drop off some of the older connectors like VGA in place of including one of these USB ports for connectivity.
well, most video cards do not have VGA to begin with in the first place. Now that since you can have an analog connection over DVI, you just use an adapter. And most video cards nowadays are coming out with an HDMI port and that support audio. And I don't, but at the same time, it depends. If the displays are driven by software, then it's a limitation of the CPU. If the displays are driven by hardware, then well, it's something else. I'm not sure. We shall see.
I think that's about all there is to it. Yeah, we'll have to see where this goes. I'm guessing with this announcement coming out now, it is primarily targeted that we could see some devices using this at CES this January.
That would be excellent.
I'll have to keep my eye out because I'm trying to work an angle to get to CES this year. I've got myself approved for a badge, so I just have to work out the logistics of actually getting there. But if I do, there will definitely be some field reports, so keep listening. You'll find out more as that develops and or if it falls apart. All right, well, closing out our headlines, we've got a story about Steam pushing a new update called their Discovery Update. It's mainly an update to the Steam store. The update includes, the new store update, I should say, includes a smart sort feature which tries to promote games relevant to your interests based on past purchases as well as what you've been playing and your friends' recommendations. The update also introduces the concept of curators. Curators are individuals or organizations who want to share their opinions on games and software offered through Steam. These curator accounts can be followed, making sure you can keep up with your favorite curators' reviews and thoughts on the games they're playing. The update should be out now, and if you haven't received the update, you should be able to force it by closing and relaunching Steam. All right, well, that takes us through our headlines. Jumping into our tech toys you wish you could buy. Our first tech toy is actually something that's already on the market, but I couldn't resist talking about it. It is the Contour Roam 3. It is a action camera, kind of a competitor, probably a direct competitor to the GoPro series of cameras. But I think it targets a very different audience. People who have a different set of needs, but still need an action camera that's small, portable, and easily mountable. Now, I know, Eric, you've got one of the slightly older generations of these cameras. And you and I were talking before the show about this new model coming out. What are your thoughts on the Contour just in general, since it seems like the technology under the hood for the camera is staying mostly the same between these two versions?
I'm a big fan of the Contour Plus 2 that I have, or whatever it's called. It looks really similar. I use it when I ride my motorcycle, and I used to use it when I drove my Volkswagen before it got trashed. And it's a really nice camera. It functions well. It looks pretty sleek. The battery life is adequate. One of my favorite things about it is its size and shape. The GoPro has a very square shape with a not large, but a relatively large front face with the camera on the outside, on the upper corner. That's fine, but since I usually have mine mounted to my motorcycle helmet, the size of the Contour lends very, very well to the helmet. And as it has a rotating lens, I can mount it at an angle, lower on my helmet next to where my jaw is, and I can rotate the lens to shoot square, so it sees things, flat, even the camera is not straight up and down. And it also has an aligning laser, so if you need help figuring out how to level it, all you do is press the status button, the laser shines, and you just look at a wall until it's straight up and down. And not only that, but also make sure you're not shooting too high or too low. So even without doing a test run, you can ensure that you're going to get video that is somewhat like what you need. But yeah, I'm a fan, and I find it to be a good little companion camera.
That's awesome. And one of the big things I know that GoPro is always praised for is their battery life. How does yours compare, or what do you usually get out of yours with battery life?
It's a little inconsistent because I usually will go a few days without charging it. I've done, I think, 3 or 4 hour rides with a continuous record. I'm not actually sure what the specs are supposed to be exactly. I usually shoot at 720p at 60 frames per second.
Okay. That doesn't seem too bad. I mean, you're able to get a trip out of it on one charge, though, right?
Yes, most trips, no problem.
And I think that's really all you need, because at the end of the day, as long as you can get from point A to point B on a single charge, you then can charge it.
Totally. It charges. You can charge it by plugging into USB, so you don't necessarily need a charger. But there's also I also have a wall socket charger, which interestingly enough, the batteries from my point and shoot camera also fit in the same charger.
That's kind of a happy coincidence.
Yes, I also bought some inexpensive aftermarket batteries that work well with it too. So not just the official Contour battery, but also the aftermarket battery also works well.
So I'm looking on their website here at the differences between the Contour Plus 2 and the Roam 3. It looks like the Plus 2 includes a couple of nice features, such as it says it has mobile connectivity.
Bluetooth.
Okay, so you can pair it over Bluetooth. What does that give you?
I really don't use it very often, but I have. There's an app on my phone, the Contour app, and when I run that and I have Bluetooth turned on my phone, I can control the recording from my phone. I can change the configuration because the phone supports up to 1080p, 30 and 60 frames per second, and a couple different modes for I think lighting. You can also preview, so you can watch what the phone's recording. So if you want to connect up and walk around your house to make sure it's got a recording, you don't actually have to turn it to record. You can just preview it through the app, and it works pretty well.
Is using it through the phone also how it achieves the GPS video mapping it mentions?
No, it has its own unit for that.
Oh wow. Is that an external unit or is there actually a GPS chip built into the camera?
Yeah, it's built in. So when you go on a ride, if you can read the data embedded in the movie, you can just watch where it was.
That's really cool. So the Contour 2 through their site is listed at $299. The Roam 3 is listed at $199, 99 cents, of course. It looks like some of the biggest differences between them is the Roam 3 throws in an 8 gigabyte memory card. Supposedly they've increased the battery life. It is also waterproof up to 30 feet without an additional case. So depending what you're recording, that could be really useful.
Yeah, I think that's a very cool feature, being highly resistant to water.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. So moving to our second product, I don't know if it's a product or you want to call it a concept, but scientists have developed a 3D printed telescope and have successfully been able to view the moon. Um, the University of Sheffield has taken the first ever photos of the moon using a 3D printed telescope. The telescope costs just around £100. That's about $164 US to make, and it's built of components that are easily sourced over the internet. The telescope's pretty basic, using concave mirrors to form an image, and then it uses a Raspberry Pi as the camera sensor to actually pick up what it's viewing. So pretty simple, pretty impressive, to be honest, especially since this is something you could reproduce at home. I'm probably going to tuck this away for at some point when 3D printers become a consumer good, or maybe when I can go over to Office Max or some office supply store and source a quality 3D printed good and see about putting this together. I think it'd be a lot of fun. What do you think about something? Is it just crazy, or is do you think there's actually anything practical to this?
I think that we need to start labeling things if they're 3D printed, if the vast majority of their important parts are 3D printed. Because when you print a body, the body of the telescope, but you actually are using, off-the-shelf mirrors and cameras, it's not a 3D printed telescope. It's a telescope with a 3D printed case.
I think that's a fair distinction. Yes, yes. 3D printed moon telescope is pure clickbait. This is actually a hobby telescope built by Parts inside a 3D printed case. That would be the actual legitimate title. You are very correct.
Don't get me wrong, still cool, but it's not a 3D print telescope. It's a telescope.
They didn't 3D print the Raspberry Pi. They didn't 3D print glass lenses to refract the images. I appreciate your honesty in journalism.
Indeed. Well, to me, it's like the 3D printed guns. It's like, yes, the body of the gun is 3D printed. It still has, a spring, a barrel, a trigger, a firing pin. It's like all the things that actually make it actually function. They did not 3D print. They had to source.
Right. And I have seen a 3D printed gun that gets as close as only the firing pin is the piece of metal in it, which is, if I understand correctly, legally required. But I completely get your point, and I think a lot of these 3D printed stories get their hype by calling themselves 3D printed this or that, and really its base might be 3D printed, but then it's a bunch of other objects making the project actually work.
Yeah, if you could do the same thing, with a hammer, some nails, and a couple pieces of wood from Home Depot, yeah, it doesn't really impress me that much. There are very many 3D printed things that impress me greatly, just not this one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, moving into our discussion topic, I know we're running a little bit long tonight, but I don't care. I really like this story. So if you're in a hurry, have a great night. Otherwise, we're going to talk about NVIDIA's new GPU proving moon landing truthers wrong. Engadget is covering this article, and it is a story about using NVIDIA's new voxel global illumination technology to render some images based on the moon landing and very accurately rendering how light would be, how light works, basically, where it would bounce, where the brightness would be, and they took some original authentic images from the moon landing, specifically one showing Buzz Aldrin stepping out of the Moonlander, which is one of the more popular images that they've replicated, and rendering it in their engine. And the 3D rendering matches the photograph perfectly. Without being told, I have a very hard time distinguishing which is the rendered image and which is the photograph. What do you think of all of this, Eric? I mean, I know you've taken a look at the photos here. I mean, the discussion is not whether or not we landed on the moon. I think we're both pretty settled on that part. But what do you think of the idea of using this technology to try and settle this once and for all?
I think that if you could settle the fact that we landed on the moon with people who don't believe it by using something called like proof or facts or some other made up BS, then it would already be over. We wouldn't be arguing about this because people would not be saying we didn't land on the moon. The fact that they already are just proves that you cannot reach them with reason.
So you're basically saying you can't fight unrealistic ideas with facts.
If you could, this world would be a very different place.
So when you take a look at the two images, without, I mean, I know they're labeled. They're very clearly labeled on the website. No one here is trying to trick anybody. But if the labels weren't there, do you think you could pick which is the real image and which is the rendering?
Yes.
What are your tip-offs?
I honestly think it's about shadows. Just because the imprecise refraction of light is noticeable even by a layman simply because of how it makes you feel odd when you look at something.
There's definitely a very strong uncanny valley feeling when I look at these photos. Not not knowing, not being able to tell immediately at a glance which is the real photo kind of bugs me, I'll be honest. And
But you have a feeling.
what's that?
But you have a feeling.
You do. I think that's true. Um, but like not reading the description at the bottom, I keep going back and forth between which is rendered and which is real. Like I can make an argument for either one being the rendered image.
Well,
Uh,
if you had watched people get in and out of their lunar lander 500 times, you'd be able to tell instantly. It's
that
just imagery that you don't see very often.
that's true.
It's
And I
literally another planet or another celestial body. Excuse me.
see, and NVIDIA's got a little video here showing off, and I know for the audio listeners, this is going to be really incredible. Um, That's nice. Apollo 11 took off. But what I want to see here is if on Gizmodo's article with this video, they do actually show a little video of of virtual Buzz actually moving. 'Cause I think some of the still images are what the uncanny valley feeling comes from. I think if I was watching this as an actual video where Buzz was moving, it would be immediately clear which was rendered and which was a real person. But overall, I have to say the core of this story is that I'm really impressed at what NVIDIA is able to do with their light rendering. Um, I know you. I don't know how much game development you've dabbled in. I just know you do a lot of programming in general, but I don't know if you've ever actually focused on game development in any way. But what do you think about this as far as other applications?
Not useful. It's just it. I mean, it's a rendering. You know, a rendering is something that you can't do on the fly. So, you know, I mean, programming conceptual for video games is like we've been able to render things that we years ago that we still cannot do. We've been able to render stills and video footage for years, things that we still cannot do today on a computer, simply because computers just video cards are just not set up, and neither are games to render imagery to that detail or that well. And most 3D games are built around using programming tricks to make them seem more real or to make the imagery seem more vivid.
But I think there is a place for this in some games. I mean, it wouldn't be on the fly rendering. I think you're right there. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we can really render something this high of quality on the fly, but I see this being used in cutscenes or being taken advantage of in animated motion pictures to increase the quality of the lighting effects, perhaps.
Maybe, but I mean, just look at some of the really high-tech 3D movies lately, and you'll see that we've already really surpassed this. What they're trying to do in this article is to prove a point using a 3D rendering that's extremely particular specifically for the lighting. The lighting is what they're talking about. Nothing else is supposed to be amazing, just the lighting. But at the end of the day, tricks and manual massaging of imagery, it can be more valuable than attempting to make it perfect from a computer the first time. Uh,
Well, it's a cool picture. I don't know what more to say to that at the end of our discussion here, but
yeah, it's pretty cool. You know, I like it.
right. I think probably my only regret is that I haven't been able to track down the images are high resolution. I would like a high resolution copy so I could use it as like a background image or something fun like that. I want to giant copy of the original image, and I haven't been able to track one of those down yet. So, All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. We've managed to go on for just over an hour now, bantering back and forth. I'm sure that's good enough for one night. I've run out of show to talk about. We already covered all of our plugs at the start of the show. You got that out of the way early for us.
All right, let these poor people go. Get out of here.
All right. Well, just to reiterate, TechTwiceWeekly.com if for whatever reason you missed the intro to the show. But otherwise, have a great night, everybody. Catch us usually Mondays and Thursdays. We'll be back this Thursday, as far as I know. And that'll do it. For Eric Fee, I'm Ben White. Have a great evening.